Welcome to my YouTube channel, everyone. My name is Rene, and today we're going to talk about the importance of governance. I've invited a special guest who knows a lot about this topic, so perhaps you can briefly introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. This is Matt from Rencore. We are a cloud collaboration governance software vendor focusing on Microsoft 365. I myself have been in the Microsoft space for 20 years, I believe, as a consultant and as the CEO of Rencore since 11 years. Yeah, looking forward to this conversation about governance, a very important topic that a lot of organizations are currently struggling with.
Yeah, it's one of my biggest fears every time I visit a customer. How's your governance? And the people get a little bit white from, oh, what are you asking? We have everything in place, but most of the times, of course, it is not in place. But let's see. Hey, can you explain what governance means in the context of an organization's digital transformation?
So what we see, of course, governance is a very broad term, and a lot of people understand very different things about governance. So in our context, we understand governance, how to stay in control of the collaboration environment, how people collaborate together without having to lock down everything, that for every tiny request you require a service ticket, but also not having Wild West in that environment, that people are just creating resources and abandoning them and creating a lot of chaos. And governance is basically helping to implement policies, or if you want, house rules, how to interact with these tools and enforce them to some extent by scaling also the enforcement out to the end users. So it's not just about defining how it's supposed to be and writing that into a piece of paper that nobody ever reads. It's about implementing an automated, scalable approach that these policies are actually adhered to.
Yeah, and that there is some balance in productivity and security.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, well, as you know, Microsoft is pushing out new functionality constantly, and that creates also a lot of uncertainty in the IT administration departments, what's going to happen. And people adopt it. People like yourself, I guess, are very, very up to date with what is happening. So, and you have these kind of more tech-savvy employees in most of the organizations, and as soon as they see something, they jump on it. They create stuff before IT is actually capable of implementing a plan. And yeah, implementing a governance practice for these kind of cases helps to have a managed approach, basically, and rein in the chaos and keep it under control.
Yeah, but like you stated, Microsoft is pushing a lot of new technology, and every customer is complaining, hey, where to start? There are so much changes coming to us. We don't know which topic we have to address first.
I think one of the core issues that most customers face, so that we hear also when we talk to them, is that they don't know what they don't know. So the way Microsoft 365 is built and structured is very siloed. So from an IT service management or administration perspective, you have in whole Microsoft world, cloud world, almost 180 admin centers. In the Microsoft 365 world, maybe 30 to 40, where everywhere is a portion of the truth, but you never see this in it, how everything is connected. You manage here the users, you manage there the teams, you manage there in another place the Power Apps, then you have your devices in Entra ID or in Intune, then you have, so it's a lot of different places. And when for example, an employee leaves the organization, then it's extremely hard to figure out what impact does that make? Where's the data? Does that person have data in the personal OneDrive that is shared with externals or internals that needs to be retained? Does that person maybe have a Power App that he or she owns that drives a critical business process that nobody knows about? Does the person maybe own other resources that might be deleted along with their user account? And with that lack of transparency that you have to kind of get this information from all these different services, is extremely hard to make a plan actually, or to implement also such a user offboarding, for example. And bringing this all together in a centralized place, and also being able to query this data across these service boundaries, is actually the basis, and reporting on that is the basis to actually implement a governance practice, in our experience.
Yeah, that's true. I recognize that, and what I see from an IT admin perspective is most admins have a certain technology silo under them, and I'm from the managed workplace. I do something with security. Oh, I only do compliance, but there is so much overlap in all those services and admin centers. You have to take it from a broader approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, then the other aspect is, of course, well, we all know about the sprawl that is happening in all these various services. So naturally, business users are using those tools to solve their business problems. So they are creating teams, SharePoint sites, apps, plans, forms, whatever. They're creating all that for a specific purpose. They are sharing and collaborating with these resources within the organization or with outside of the organization. But people rarely clean up after they are done with their work. So a lot of chaos gets created, and IT does not have the knowledge to decide what's still needed, who should still have access, what can be removed, what needs to be archived, for example, because of compliance reasons and so on. So governance helps you to enforce a practice where you define what should happen, where you identify resources, for example, that appear to be no longer needed, and delegate the decision to the rest of the organization, to the owners of the resources, to the collaborators with the resource, to decide what should happen with the resource. And a governance tool and a governance platform that drives that process helps you to keep the house clean to some extent. The chaos is constantly recreating, obviously, so it's never done. But it helps you to keep the house clean, to also keep the employees efficient and not having 10 different versions of the same data in 5 different teams, and then you roll out Copilot and you never know which version is Copilot actually pulling the data from, and is it still up to date. So cleaning out information that might no longer be valid or up to date is also a kind of a hygiene for your tenant that you need to enforce. And doesn't have to do anything with Copilot, to be honest. With enterprise search, you have the same problems. It's the problem has been there since
Way
data
back.
was stored. Yeah, it's with Copilot, it's just so much simpler to retrieve that information, and so much more intransparent where the information comes from, and hence a governance approach to make sure that old and outdated information gets weeded out is helping you also to get better results at the end.
Totally agree, and always tell other people, hey, leave the word Copilot. It's your basic hygiene, and with or without Copilot, it already has to be in place.
Exactly, and that's also why a lot of organizations are worried about rolling out Copilot fully, because they don't know who has access to what's happening, and how old is the data, and but this is not a Copilot problem, as you said. It's a problem of managing these services and keeping them clean and tidy. Similar with permissions, access reviews, performing regular access reviews, on resources drives better results in Copilot and reduces risk in people getting data exposed that they shouldn't, for example.
Totally true. And maybe you recognize the following. Yeah? People often approach governance or adoption or other topics. Yeah, it's a one-time approach. When I do this, everything is in place. Sorry, you are working with cloud technology. It changes every day. So yeah, over a year, your complete platform is completely different.
We have currently a customer with who we are using our tool. They have 130,000 employees and 100,000 external collaborators. Just imagine that.
Yeah.
And they have for these, so in total, 230,000 collaborators on their Microsoft 365 platform. They have 250,000 Microsoft Teams. So they have more teams than they have people who collaborate. So it's unimaginable how someone actually can find anything. So because they basically didn't have a governance approach, and then chaos just grew and grew and grew, and it also creates costs, of course. So all these teams, they consume storage, they have a SharePoint site in the back, they need to be administered, groups are created, and everything, all the resources that go along with it. And yeah, so implementing a governance approach is extremely necessary that you don't end up in such a situation. So cleaning that up is much more work than keeping it under control while it's constantly creating.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have another question for you, Matt.
Go ahead.
How can standardization within governance processes help an organization operate more efficiently?
Yeah, so what we see in organizations, well, we touched that topic actually already. So depends who you talk about. If you talk about business users, of course, if you have less places to look into and work into, and I don't know, let's say you work in marketing and you have 25 teams, marketing project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some collaboration happens here and there, and some is actually the project is already done, but it's still kept around. This creates just time that you are wasting in figuring out things, where to communicate, where to find information, and so on. Doesn't mean that everything needs to be deleted, but even archiving. Okay, project is done. We have a process in place that archives that team, that it's read-only. That is already helping users to focus only on the things that are actually still relevant for them, and not having to fear that something gets lost. And I think there's a lot to be gained. In general, people are wasting a lot of time in finding information, and even in a small organization like ours with 50 plus people, I don't sometimes know, oh, did I collaborate in the OneDrive, share the file via OneDrive, or was it in a team, or was it did we talk about it in a chat or in a team at the end? And oh, now suddenly we need to involve somebody else. Do we need to transfer that? So helping to clean up the mess and creating also guidance, structuring things, for example, in regards of how specific types of teams or collaboration workspaces should look like, is helping employees a lot to streamline their work. So provisioning, for example, is a typical governance topic. You probably have touched that in the past as well. Defining, hey, a project template that always looks like this, and people find their way around much easier. And it has a life cycle. A project is done at some point, and then X will happen. Whereas a department team is maybe a total different kind of template. Building these kind of standards help end users tremendously to get more efficient in their work and find their data that they have to work with much quicker.
Yeah, and it often starts with the basics. How do we want to work together? What is our way of working? What are the pros and cons for a standard channel or a private channel or a shared channel? Make choices.
it's also part of governance, actually, providing also that guidance. So one by templates, but also guiding along with that, because well, if we think about during pandemic, a lot of organizations rolled out teams without a plan, basically just to make their workforce capable to continue to work. And then some people found out, hey, you can create channels, and then they created a channel for everything. And then some thought, hey, you can convert a SharePoint site to a team, and then they converted teamified sites, and then suddenly things popped up left and right, and all look different and are interacting different, and that makes it hard. So standardizing and communicating also best practices and guidance in specific business scenarios like projects or like, I don't know, customer sales bids, or depending on your practice, structuring that and standardizing that is helping end users a lot to become way more efficient and not having to figure it out every time again, how to do things.
True, and also it's not a one-time approach. It's continuously evolving.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. In your experience, what common challenges do organizations face when implementing governance for their Microsoft 365 environment? Do you have any examples you guys see at the customer side?
So, as I said already before, most of the organizations often lack the insights in the first place to even understand how bad is it, right? So this is often the first challenge, to figure out the situation, implement in the first place maybe reports and dashboards to understand and track also how things are changing. How many unused teams do we have? What is an unused team actually for us? How do you define that? And okay, and how is that evolving? Is this getting worse, or is it getting better? Or these kind of questions often are very hard in the first place to answer before you even have a governance practice implemented. And then I think from a maturity level, the next step is then to implement policies to track, okay, this is how we want it to be, and to track what does violate these policies. And that can be totally different things. Can be simple things like, I don't know, a team should have a redundant ownership. Obviously, that is changing throughout the time in the organization when people change roles or leave the organization. Can be also more complex things like, I don't know, client secrets in Azure Enter ID that are expiring, and business applications stop functioning, and you want to be alarmed about that. Or SharePoint sites that have libraries that use a Power Automate flow that has a premium connector using a user account who's no longer in the organization. So the complexity can be quite big. Building up, first of all, okay, what is actually a problem for us, and monitoring that problem is then, I think, the next challenge, where often experts like yourself come in and help customers with your experience, what you have seen. Most of the times the challenges are quite similar throughout the organizations. Often just there are no nuances, and organization X is a little bit more here a problem than there, and there are different approaches how they want to implement policies, but the general problems are mostly identical within the organizations.
Yeah, I believe like 90% is standard. You see it at every customer.
Exactly.
But most of the times, like you said, the maturity of an organization, it plays a lot in, hey, how do you want to approach this problem for this customer?
Exactly. Yeah, and then I see the next challenge that the organizations then are facing, and that's I would say the next maturity level in regards of governance an organization needs to achieve, is how do we actually deal with these policy violations in a scalable way? Because nobody wants to look into a tool every day and find out, oh, what's wrong today? Okay, now we need to call that employee out. What should we do now? And now we create a ServiceNow ticket here, and so on. This does not scale. So you need to implement an approach to, in best case, fully automatically resolve violations. Let's say you say every SharePoint site that has not been changed in the last year is automatically archived, or is something like that. You can do that maybe automatically and just inform the owners, sorry, no activity. If you want to do anything about it, press this button. In this way, you can automate the resolution of those policy violations, but in particular then scaling that out to the organization. So a lot of the times IT is not capable of making the decision, what should happen here? Is that user still allowed to have access here only because he had access a year ago? Is that external user who received an invite but didn't accept it, should that person still keep that invite to that resource? And things like that. It's often very, or actually impossible for IT to make that decision. So a successful governance approach requires to involve the end users in that decision. So you need to automate that process and delegate the decision making to the actual business who's owning those resources, and then feeding that back into that automated resolution approach. And once you are there, then you can maintain that control throughout the time, throughout all that chaos that is constantly recreating.
Yeah, but I believe it starts with a small culture change from an IT perspective. Hey, IT, have a good conversation with the business. Hey, business, talk to IT what you need. And that culture change is still a thing I see a lot of organizations struggle a little bit with.
Definitely, yeah, I totally agree. That the tooling is not helping alone, of course. You need to also communicate well how this is actually helping the end users. So the benefits also for the end users that are coming out of implementing governance, so that it's not considered to be a burden, but rather an efficiency game for them, because they know exactly what to do, why to do it, and what benefit they have themselves out of it. And this is, as you said, a culture change that needs to be communicated well, and it is something that is usually not solved by a tool alone. It's usually a project or a practice that needs to be established within an organization.
Yeah, and also in the early days, you did an exam, you got a certification for Windows Server version X, and you were ready for 5 years. But these days, it's a sort of continuous development process for yourself as an IT admin, and that's also like a sort of culture change. You have to be on top of that in the developments.
Definitely, yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, everything is a little bit more fast-paced now, right?
Yeah, true,
Slightly.
true. Hey, I have a last question for you, because we already addressed a lot of topics in this conversation. How do you see the role of governance evolving as AI and automation become more integrated into 365? And what new challenges and opportunities might this bring?
So I would say so it depends how you see AI. If you see AI as co-pilot, I think it's a controversial topic at the moment. I think the hype has faded a little bit, and now it needs to become clear what is actually the productivity gain. Not everyone is a technical power user who can really leverage Copilot, for example, in Microsoft 365, the way that Microsoft intends it to be. And for that, the business case needs to be clear for the organization. So I think this is a little bit of a prohibiting factor at the moment, that as long as it's not a full no-brainer for an organization to roll out Copilot as AI, you will not really have this kind of adoption that you see reap these benefits throughout the organization. And Microsoft is working on that, and I think there's a lot to be gained, but at least my impression, I don't know if you see the same, but that initial hype is currently a little bit more toned down, and now it's more like, okay, so what do we actually get out of it? Nevertheless, I see a lot of opportunity there also, and a lot of opportunity in governance, in a sense of, okay, how can we use AI in governing our collaboration environment, identifying resources, for example, or risks maybe, or also developments in that infrastructure that can be prevented. For example, something pops up somewhere, people are suddenly creating an unusual amount of certain resources in an area of the organization, identifying these kind of things, and extrapolating what that could mean for the future. That is an interesting use of AI for assuring that everything remains under control and is governed. And the other way around, AI governance, so governing the AI, is the other angle that you could look at, is also a big opportunity, because AI will become omnipresent in all areas. And with the AI come also a lot of risks, like hallucinations. Where does the data come from? Do you have actually access to the data? So, for example, Copilot Studio, that is, allowing basically everyone to create their own GPT or their own agent to provide information within the organization. But in Copilot Studio, you can build such an agent, for example, based on the data of a SharePoint site, and expose that to other people in the organization who might not initially have access to that. And being able to govern also, okay, what are people actually doing with AI, and where does the data come from, and how is it exposed to whom, and governing that will be a big challenge, and also a big opportunity for adoption of these AI functionalities. So exciting times ahead, I would say.
Yeah. But I'm recognizing the same you just stated. The hype is a little bit gone, and I see a lot of organizations already do a proof of concept, but still struggling a little bit for, hey, what are we going to do with such technology? Are we going to implement it in our processes? But also, hey, which benefits do we get from it?
Yeah, and especially in comparison to costs. So budgets are still tight within the organization. Costs are cut. We see that in the news up and down, where organizations are laying off people, or where they have bad earnings results and all budgets are frozen. So using it also, and so on the one hand, the costs of the AI need to have a clear return on invest, and that is at the moment still very vague, so very emotional, I would say. And then also using AI to actually optimize and cut costs is also a big opportunity in the future, and a lot of organizations are doing that already in some areas. For example, supply chain management and optimizing their supply chain, they use already AI, and it's actually also nothing so extraordinarily new that has been done in the past before GPT and so on already. So there is a lot of opportunity there, and it's also a big governance topic, of course, optimizing costs and license usage and storage usage and so on. So also something that we address with our solution a lot, where we see that it resonates a lot with the organization, obviously, in current times.
Yeah. Often organizations start with using Microsoft 365 Copilot, but they don't look, hey, is this the right Copilot for my problem? And have you defined some use cases, personas, and that can help you a little bit. Which Copilot is good for my organization to solve my problem?
I think the challenge there is also with the well-known marketing approach of Microsoft, naming everything the same, but actually meaning different things with it. So everything is called Copilot nowadays, but these Copilots are quite different in the different areas. So that doesn't really help people to understand the value, in my opinion, at least.
No, totally true. Hey, as a last question for this interview, of maybe just a little bit other, do you have a tip of the day for us?
A tip of the day.
Tip of the day from Matt.
Oh, that's you should have given me that question beforehand. So the tip of the day, well, the biggest tip of the day is enjoy the rest of the Friday and really have a great weekend. So don't stress yourself too much. Yeah, so in general, I think if you don't have, so let's stay on topic, if you don't have governance or don't understand yet what governance actually means for you, then you should rather start thinking sooner than later, because everyone that we talk to, that we see, they basically regret that they haven't thought about it earlier, because the chaos is just so much bigger and increasing also at a faster pace, that the later you start thinking about these topics and how you want to address them and approach them, the more painful and costly it will become to resolve and get them under control at the end.
I totally agree, Matt. Hey, thank you for this interview and for your time.
Thank you very much, Rene, for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome, and hopefully it gives a lot of people some insights and why governance is so important.
So if you want to learn more, of course, I have to plug Rencore. So go to rencore.com. We have a lot of content there also around various different areas. We have also guest bloggers who provide their insights from their consulting practices, for example. So feel free to take a look, and otherwise reach out to Rene. He can help you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rene.